Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Welcome to So That Just Happened, a podcast for those who have lost their person and want to find themselves. I'm Carly Cooper, a single mom, widow, coach, author, and chronic truth seeker. My superpower is finding the funny, the hope, and the silver lining in any shit situation. This podcast is for the purpose of education only and is not a replacement for therapy. If you need additional support, please seek out a trained professional for help with your specific situation. Let's get to it, shall we? For this week's episode, I had the pleasure to interview a dear friend of mine, Marnie Adler, who is a force to be reckoned with. Let me just say that. She has done it all. Over her 20-plus year career, Marnie has developed, directed, produced, and or cast numerous heavy-hitting formatted series like Four Weddings Canada, syndicated docudramas, Masterminds, Cold Blood, competition shows like MasterChef, Cash Cab, and The Great Canadian Baking Show, as well as original live-action children's programming shows like Cooked, which my son was on, by the way, and gaming show in my parents' garage. She ran her own branded content and talent coaching service, helping to build the creative narrative for brands of major international companies and public relations firms. And she is a certified Pilates instructor for over 10 years. And Marnie teaches mat work, reformer, and tower-based Pilates. She has recently launched a subscription-based website with access to over 250 mat work classes for all levels. Let me tell you, I am taking it. She is kicking my ass in all the best ways, and I love and hate her for it. So please enjoy this interview. I think you're going to get some really good takeaways from a type A, ambitious go-getter of a woman who also shows a vulnerable side. Please enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of So That Just Happened. And I have the pleasure of talking with a very dear friend of mine, Marnie Adler, née Sugarman. And we have lots to talk about always. We're going to try and rein it in and keep it on point. And if anybody knows Marnie, and many people do, you know that she is an incredibly strong, independent. I call her my Brie Vandekamp because she's the one who cooks for me and my son, because without her, he wouldn't eat. And she's a type A, get shit done kind of person. Really good to have in your corner. And very scary to have on the other side of that. But I see this personality come out in our friendship. You are a fierce and loyal friend, and you were very, very instrumental in helping me get through the Shiva of my late husband. You produced the shit out of it, and it was during COVID still. So you ran that like a well-oiled machine, and I'm so grateful for that. But I also see that this is how you operate in your life. You are a TV producer, you're a Pilates instructor, you do like all the things, and you manage your career in this way, you manage your family in this way. And, sadly, you lost your father. What was it, 9 or 10 years ago?
It's 10 years ago this December.
Yes. So I just want to chat with you about that, if you're comfortable with that. And just, for someone who is so strong, because I feel that I'm strong too. And I feel like, did we have a different way of grieving? Not that one is right or wrong, but how did you grieve the loss of your father? And was it in that same strong type A kind of way, or did you show up differently? And hi, by the way.
Hi.
Let's just get right into it.
Let's get right into it. No, it's good. It's good. I mean, talking about my dad and talking about grief is not something that I shy away from. So I'm super comfortable to talk about it. I think that, as far as grieving goes, I think it's very different for everybody depending on the process that leads up to that grief,
Mm-hmm.
and leads up to the passing. My father was sick for a very long time. He had a disease called Parkinson's plus, which masks itself as Parkinson's at onset, but it mimics Parkinson's. It's not actually Parkinson's, and it manifests more like a Lou Gehrig's. So watching him over the years get worse and worse, and things add on, like adding fuel to fire, as you could say, and then be bedridden for the last 2 years of his life. There wasn't, that's not how I want to remember my dad. But leading up to those points in his illness is what, I think I started grieving then. I think I started grieving the process long before he passed. And there was a heaviness, and then there was a lightness in his passing. There was a space to breathe. There was a moment where we knew that he was no longer in discomfort. Whatever embarrassment he suffered over, the last years of his life that, were horrible for him, was done. And there was a peace that came over. I think for me, for sure, I can't speak for my sister and my mom, but I feel like all of us just wanted him to be at peace, which for anybody with any illness, I think that's the ultimate goal. It's the people who they leave behind. And you and I have talked a lot about how I feel like I was prepared all my life for not the passing of him, but the passing of individuals in general, and how I handle death in general is something that was learned over time. I think it's different when it's somebody who's super close to you, but I think that it lent itself, much like you as a coach, were very prepared to handle certain steps that came your way. I think there was a preparation that my parents, maybe knowingly or unknowingly, were very much creating, not somebody who was desensitized to death, but somebody who learned that death was a part of life, and that you had to learn about it at a young age, and you had to be a part of it, and you had to see it, and you had to appreciate life and death, and be there for people in life and be there for people in death. And so watching my father sort of go down, just not have a life anymore, there was a peace. I did not deal with it, though. I didn't deal with it at all, I don't think. And I can remember that it was on the third day of Shiva that I got a call from a friend of mine in the business, and she didn't know that my dad had passed away, and it was Shiva, and she asked me to come and produce this series, and it was going to start like 3 days after Shiva. And it was literally that I, jump started right from Shiva into a show, and had a great, amazing group of very supportive people around me, some of whom probably didn't know that my father had literally just passed away. And I dove headfirst into that, like my type A personality. And very spot on introduction for sure. And then at the end of that show, I can remember we had a cake. It was a 6-week shoot. It was fast and amazing, and it involved kids, and it was very lighthearted. And there was a cake, and I walked to my car, and everybody had left for the day. And I got into my car, and I started wailing, like uncontrollable crying. And I called my mom, and I said to her, I just realized that Daddy died.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's can be a really common reaction too for us. I will put myself in the category too, type A control freaks in the best kind of way. Because similarly, I dove in. Our situations were obviously different. Your father was a slow, long decline, and my situation was very quick and sudden and unexpected. But I also distracted myself heavily. And even though, I dealt with it to some degree, and I had the acceptance and the awareness, maybe not full acceptance, but, I still dove into the work of death, like the forms and the claims and the tying up loose ends and getting things into my name. And then I decluttered my house and renovated it and like all the things. And so it was like a good 7 months before of like full distraction, and definitely like had the feels throughout. But it wasn't until really like January of 2022 when everything was done and the renovation was complete and I had like nothing else to sort of take my attention away. And that's when I like sat in the mud of it and like was just like, oh yeah, this is what it's like to feel. And so, you said that you sort of grew up knowing and being raised to regard death as just like a normal part of your life. So a two-part question: why do you think your parents did that? Like, I know you said like it may have been intentional or not intentional, but like, is that how they grew up? Or like, do you think that it was something that they were really just trying to normalize for you? That's part A. And part B, how do you think that helped or hindered you when it came to grieving your dad? And like, again, no blame on your
No,
parents,
I
like at
feel like
all.
it's such a good question. And I think about it all the time as I was raising my kids and when my father passed away, how I would approach that with them. And Stephen, my husband, and I have talked about it a lot. Growing up in a small Jewish community meant that that community did everything for the people in the community. So my mother was always with her friends planning Shiva meals and going over to serve Shiva meals. And we were a part of going to the Shiva and paying our respects. And my father, at one point, in many ways, that they dedicated themselves to the community in many ways. And one of the ways that my father dedicated himself was that he became the head of the cemetery committee. And so in Kingston, if you died, you called my dad. So like when the phone rang,
Yeah.
we were like the first people to know that somebody in the community had died. And then he like steps into action. No, he wasn't one of the people. There were also people who dedicated themselves to preparing the body for funeral, because that we didn't have a Benjamins or a Papermans or anything like that. Like there was a committee of community people who dedicated their lives to ensuring that the passing of these individuals in this small community were done under the guidance of and rules and laws of kashrut. Is it kashrut? I don't even know if it's kashrut. That's food. Is that
Let's
food?
just
I don't
say
even know what I'm saying.
yes.
I don't know. Trigger. Anyway, so that respect for life in death was significant. And I can remember my mother taking me to my Uncle Sheldon's funeral, my grandmother's brother's funeral. I couldn't have been more than 7 years old, but that's what you did. You went to the funeral, no matter what the situation was. You showed up at the funeral, you showed up at the Shiva. My father counted as 10 men for a minyan. He was there in the morning, he was there at night. You just showed up. And I don't know any differently. So when my father was dying, it wasn't up to me to be that person for my family. Although, when I go to a Shiva, I go directly to the kitchen. I'm like, what can I do? Can I plate something? Can I change something? Like I want to be present for the people, but I also want to help. Like there's so much that can be done to organize and arrange. You've made jokes about that before, about how I should
No,
start
but honestly though, like I make
um,
jokes about it, but I'm also like being the recipient of that and seeing that like you at work. I mean, I've seen it just in our friendship without, the Shiva and the emotion around it, like just a regular Sunday night. I've seen it and I appreciate it so much because it's so not me. But it is really like when you look at it from a community coming together and rallying around people to support them and do for them when they are not in the headspace to do, it's a beautiful thing and it's a beautiful way to be raised, I would think. But I'm also just, again, curious, like, does that put you in a place of just like, put your head down, put the blinders on, and not give yourself a chance to feel? Um, and again, not that that's a good or bad thing. I'm just like curious if like you're so in work focused mode of like get the job done. Did that, like, now being on the other side of it and being the one who's going through it, how did that affect you or impact the way that you grieved for your dad or didn't grieve for your dad right away?
I think that I grieved for him for so long in advance of him dying that I was so prepared. I wasn't prepared for as many pecan pies that would be at the Shiva house.
They're still probably frozen in your
I probably
freezer.
have one in my freezer.
You do pull those out at award shows.
That's right. That's right. Delicious. I was really prepared. I had a harder time watching my dad suffer than I did after he passed. I definitely had grieved that moment. There's all sorts of, listen, my father did not have any pain in the end. He, we brought our children into the hospital room when he was in palliative. They sat with him. They sat with us. They were back and forth from Toronto. We hid nothing. I tell this funny joke. Mia was 5 years old, and my father had an oxygen mask in his nose that was giving him like 10% oxygen. And Mia was sitting on her iPad watching a show, like, it's the dead of winter. And, Stephen had brought them in for a couple of days. My sister and I like went and lived in Kingston for the last 2 weeks while he was in palliative. And then Stephen brought the kids back and forth. My sister's kids were much younger. It wasn't a thing. And Mia's sitting in the chair, and you think that she knows nothing and she sees nothing. And then we went through this agonizing conversation, me, my sister, my mother, and the palliative care nurse, as to, is this oxygen keeping him alive? Does he need this in his nose? Should we take this out? Should we and we eventually took this oxygen out, and we're staring at him thinking, this is it. We've taken this 10% oxygen out. We're staring. And all of a sudden, Mia walks into the room. She's 5 years old and goes, "Hey, who took the thing out of granddaddy's nose?" And if you know Mia,
Yes.
that zero filter, and this is like,
Yes.
who she is. And we all start laughing because we literally thought we were going to kill him in that moment. And she took all the air out of the room and just let us just realize that, like, this is okay to be around. Death is okay to be around. She's here as a 5-year-old witnessing it from her perspective. I'm witnessing, at the time I was 37, and I was seeing it from my perspective. My mother was seeing it from a perspective of a caregiver who had done it for 10 years.
Yeah.
I think that everybody sees a particular death a different way. I had grieved up until that point. I cried a lot after he died. And then I jumped in headfirst into that job. And then I cried after. And I've cried for 10 years since on certain occasions. I see, my father was in the steel business. I see a truck I feel like he's sending me a sign. Like, I firmly believe in the grieving process taking its time, like going over time. I have zero regrets about the closure that I had with him. I was with him up until the night that he died. He did not clearly want us in the room when he did. The palliative care nurse said to us, "Guys, you got to walk away for a little bit." And in the moment when we walked away and Lori and I went back to our hotel, that was the night he died. Some people just need their space to do what they need to do for them. And that was my father's way. And it was very, were we angry that we weren't there? Nope. We had been there, and he needed to do what he needed to do. And I had spent my last birthday with him in palliative care and had that moment with him where, he looked me in the eyes for the last time before he closed his eyes. And I said, "Blink twice if you love me." And he did. And then I said, "Blink twice if you wish me happy birthday." And he did. And he closed his eyes and he never opened them again. I had my moments. I had those moments, but I cry all the time.
Yeah.
I cry on the anniversary. I cry. I mean, I don't think grieving has to be done. I just think that I was really prepared for death.
Yeah.
And I feel like I wanted to prepare my kids for that too. My kids were, like I said, in the hospital room, and they were at the funeral. They were at the cemetery. They heard what I had to say, what my sister had to say about him. We've talked about it for years since. There was a little discussion about whether or not the girls would be at the cemetery, and I was adamant that they be at the cemetery. And each of my friends took one of them and sort of was in charge of them. And then all of a sudden, again, Mia, out of the blue, while we're covering the grave with dirt, says, "I want to shovel dirt on Granddaddy's grave." And I'm like, great, you
Mm.
should. If like these are the moments where we cannot determine what is best for our kids in certain situations, we have to open it up and let it breathe. And I'm glad that my parents did that for me. I hope that I did the right thing by my children. And we talk about my dad all the time. We talk about it when it's his birthday, when it's Father's Day sucks, as I'm sure Father's Day sucks in your house. It's one of those things that you don't prepare yourself for. The firsts, the elements that go by that are the highs and lows. And like I said, like a truck could be driving on the highway and I could have a moment, and that's fine. Like that
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
totally fine for me. But that is my type A personality, like completely allowing myself to let go, which no, when he first died and I took that gig, I did not. I absolutely, like you, dove into putting anything in my way that would allow me to just continue on and live. And then I had my moment, and then the moments come when they come.
Yeah. And I think that, you and I are also very similar, but in many ways. But for me, it was like I knew that in order for me to get stuff done that is really important, and like I didn't have a choice because I'm now the only parent who has to take care of my son, the dogs, the house, the payments, all of it. Like I had nobody to sort of do all that. And I knew myself enough that if I completely let myself stop, it's going to be very hard for me to get back up and gain the momentum again. And so I knew that the crash would come, but I needed to get a lot of stuff that needed to get done first. And then I would allow the crash, because I'll eventually get back up. But I knew that it was going to hit me hard, and I couldn't afford to be hit hard yet. And maybe that's similar to you, that eventually you get there. And it's not like I'm down for long, and no judgment. Like I still have, for me, it's been just over 2 years. But there are some days that are super easy and great. And then there are days when I least expected, or moments when I least expected, or things that I didn't think would trigger me. Like I literally cannot watch anything now without crying, whether it's just a goodbye or, it doesn't even have to be so on the nose. It's just like, I love and I want to feel, and I feel things so hard. And, so it's changed me in that way. But, I think that, look, I know I have the pleasure of knowing your girls and your family well. You and Stephen have done an incredible job with them. They're great girls, very empathetic, very open. Mia in particular, God
Yeah.
bless her. But no, I think it's great. And I think everybody, like you said, handles it in different ways. But I also know families, and no judgment, but who don't talk about it at all. And I think it's about, really reading the room and knowing what your kids can handle when, based on their personalities and how they were raised. And, for me, like my son, he doesn't want to talk about it a lot. He's shut down. It doesn't mean we don't go there occasionally, but I also know that I have to tread more lightly and I have to handle it in different ways. So, um, I think the fact that you talk about everything and you give the permission to handle it in whichever way feels right. And for me, I handle uncomfortable situations with dark humor.
You sure
Right
do.
or wrong. I
And
mean,
I can,
I
some of
have to
those
tell you, I
some of those,
rocked the Shiva. And like,
you
it
did.
wasn't like, honestly, like I wasn't trying to be disrespectful at all. And I think people who really know me and who knew
Yeah.
Mark and who knew Mark and I together knew that he wouldn't want it any other way. I wasn't being disrespectful and like, okay, whatever. But, like I just step into the role of comforting other people. And, and they, even though it was a shock for me as well, and I wasn't expecting it, I knew that Mark was in a dark place that other people may not have realized. And so my way of handling any kind of uncomfortable situation is to go into the somewhat inappropriate, dark humor kind of route. And that helps me. And I know that Mark was laughing at it. Like I know that. But obviously not everybody's like that. And you just have to find your way. And I think that you've done an incredible job doing that. And, like you said, grief doesn't go away. It just
No.
it lightens up and it shows up when you least expect it. But I say the more tears you shed just shows how much you loved that person. And, I think that can be a beautiful thing too.
Yeah, I mean, nobody does Shiva like you, babe. Like
Well, I hope I don't have to do it again. I don't want
no,
to be on the
never.
circuit.
But you handled yourself with such, I mean, we talked about the fact that you should do a documentary called Grieving with Grace, because I've never in my life experienced, I mean, I was around a lot in that time, like immediately after, and was the I had the benefit of the dark humor and some of the conversations we had. I can remember, and I still I laugh about it, because Mark would absolutely have loved to have heard some of the shit that was coming out of your mouth,
I
and
think he did. I really think he
did.
did.
He really did. He definitely did. And no, it's every child handles it differently. Everybody has to give their own permission to feel what they feel when they're ready to feel it. And then when they're ready to have those conversations, I mean, I like, there's something, I think it was a couple of years ago, and I didn't even bring it up. And it's like, December 2nd, my father died on December 2nd. So, Mia had said something, or Sam, I don't even remember who it was, but somebody said, like, I'm really, for some reason, I'm really thinking about granddaddy. I don't think they remember that he died on December 2nd. They were too young to remember what the date was.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's an emotional attachment to dates and places and things, and we can't prepare ourselves for them, but we have to give ourselves permission to feel them when we are in that moment. And you have done that tenfold. Like and the best thing that you do is telling people, I'm in that moment right now and I don't want to talk, or I'm feeling that today and it's not a good day. And that's the permission that you've given yourself to hold, to say to people, please, I've got this. I just need to have this moment, and I'll be back when I'm back.
Yes. And and I appreciate people respecting that too, because some people want to be surrounded in those moments with other people and some people don't. And I'm one of those people that I love my connections and I need my connections and I need my people, but I need my people after I've given myself that space to just sort of feel and have my moments of just disconnect, because I need that too. So it is important to know what you need, and then also to be able to feel safe enough to articulate that, and hope that you have the right people around you who are going to respect that. So I wanted to ask you, because you're obviously super strong, you're an incredible giver, you are one of the most loyal friends I have and I know. And I know for me that it's often hard, as also a fellow good giver. It's hard for me to ask for help and to accept it and to receive it. So I want to know from you, because you're such a great giver and that comes so easily to you and it's just who you are, do you ever ask for help and do you accept it?
Are you just buttering me up for another meal?
Well, what I love so much is when I ask you if you want me to help clean up and you're like, no. And I'm like, okay, great. At least I
That's
asked.
right. That's right. I am terrible at asking for help.
Yeah.
Terrible. I'm terrible at it.
And why do you think that is?
I don't know. Look, there are certain things that come with a type A personality, and I like to do things
Your way.
my way. And, my mother always said, if you want something done right, do it yourself.
Yes.
So it's easier because if I see somebody else do it and it's not the way I want to do it, it drives me crazy. So I'm just happier to do it myself. if anybody, like I had there was this one time when somebody said, oh, I'll bring the fruit to your house for dessert. And sometimes I hate doing dessert and I'm like, amazing. Okay. You do the fruit. And they showed up with the fruit in the pints unwashed. And I'm like, that's not doing the fruit. Right. If you're doing the fruit, you're washing it at home, you're drying it at home, you're cutting it, you're putting it on a platter, and you're showing up with the platter fucking done.
Yeah.
So, I see that to me. I was like, I should have just done the fruit because now I'm doing the fruit now.
And you're just resentful about it.
I'm resentful of the fruit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it.
So that's the best example of why I would, just rather do things for myself. But I also, there are things that I absolutely don't have, that I'm not strong, that are not my strengths, and that I'm very happy for other people to take on.
Name one.
Travel.
Oh, okay.
Travel. When we're going somewhere or we're going to book something, I don't care. I'm like, just tell me where we're going and I will pack a bag. Yeah. Stephen does that really well. I just need, a loose itinerary and, whatever, and I'll throw my shit together and I'm ready to go. I want nothing to do with booking, planning, or arranging travel.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair.
That's the one thing. But when it comes to the rest of my life,
back away.
Yeah, no, I mean, but I come by and honestly, as a television producer, we are a breed of human beings that just like to organize and do, and we're good under pressure. We deal with crisis really well. It's just easier to do it myself. Not that I don't want people to offer. Offering is really nice. I like a good offer. Doesn't mean I'm going to take you up on it, but it doesn't mean that I didn't appreciate the offer.
That's why we work so well. Because I will always offer and you will always turn me down, and we're both happier for it.
That's right. Exactly.
So yeah, we're a match made.
As long as you return my Ziploc containers.
I always return your Ziploc and they're washed. I don't just bring them to a second location and have you wash them. I wash them.
You know that if they're washed and returned, they will get refilled and redelivered.
I'm no dummy.
Exactly.
Okay. So is there anything that you would do differently now that you didn't do back then when it came to grieving your dad?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely would have taken a beat. I probably should not. I mean, I did a great job when I did the job, but I think we're so much more aware of mental health and the way that we need to respond to certain scenarios, that for that 6-week gig, as much as I loved it, and I was working with some of the greatest people and I had the best time, I probably, in hindsight, should have allowed myself to grieve first and work later. But I'm not like that, Yeah. I don't regret taking the job. I don't regret doing the job. I don't regret any of that. But, who did I not did I leave my mother to grieve by herself? Did my sister not have access to me? Did I not give my kids access? did I not, what didn't I do in that 6 weeks when I was dedicating myself to my job right after my father passed away that I missed? What did I miss? Did I miss anything? Did something happen in that time that I didn't see? I don't know. I don't think it would have been better for me. I don't think I'm thinking about myself in this situation, because I literally, like you, have to throw myself headfirst into something and move on fast and deal with it later. Like I
Yeah.
give myself permission. It's whenever it happens. And it happened in the car on the last day when we wrapped, and I bawled my eyes out and I had my moment, and I've had many moments since. But I always think, did I miss out on helping in other ways with other people that were also mourning the loss of my father? And would that have helped me as well? So,
I mean, it's hindsight, and the truth is everybody has to experience grief in their own way on their own time, and it's not on you to make it better or easier for somebody. I mean, yes, we can all support and we can all be there to comfort, but everybody has to experience it and go through it in their own way on their own time. And
yeah.
that's what I'm learning too, especially with my son. Like, I can't force him to feel or talk about or any of it. He's got to do it in his own way in his own time, because we're very similar in that way. Like, if somebody asked me to talk about it when I wasn't ready to, I would shut down. And I really didn't talk about it with many, certainly not in the way that I'm doing it now, for like a good year and a bit. Like, I unplugged from social media and from, connecting with many. Unless you were my very, very close friend, you didn't really know what was going on with me. And that's what I needed to happen, because I needed to take the time to process and heal and figure it out and gain my closure and gain my acceptance and my understanding and all of that. And I need to do that on my own and figure that out on my own. I mean, yes, I did have support. I did reach out for EMDR therapy, and I had my own coach. And so I had people, but it definitely took me time to get there. And, if I would have told myself back then that I would be talking about it on a podcast, I'd be like, are you crazy? Like, what would I even say? And I'm not even ready. So I needed to find the time to be able to even just articulate my thoughts,
The best thing about you is that you talk about it. I mean, I can remember after Mark died that I had many a breakdown in my shed, like working out in the morning and then just taking a minute and saying, this, I can't do this. Like, I don't know where you got the strength to handle it all. And I can remember vividly the moments where I couldn't handle it. And it wasn't my husband, but watching you and the strength that you had to go through it, and watching you and Jack together, and, manifesting this new destiny that was your new reality and your new future, was one of the most prominent things that I've ever experienced in my life. I think that was one of those learning moments that, said to me, this is why you have to teach your children about death being a part of life. Because when it is sudden and when it is unexpected is when that counts. And when you can try your best to prepare yourself for something, for the most unimaginable experience, that's when you can say, okay, I've done some of the work. This is not going to help right now, but it's going to help eventually, which it did. All of the work that you've done in your entire life has helped you to manifest to this podcast, like you talking about it and you making it normal to talk about death and grief is beyond significant for other people who, for whatever reason, they've lost somebody. The way that you're giving back in teaching and honoring Mark's life this is exactly what you were meant to do. And you just needed to get there in whatever way you got there.
Thank you. You just gave me full body chills. What advice, before we wrap up, what advice can you give to other strong, independent, type A people who have lost someone close to them? And again, we all do it differently, but we have a way. And, I'm just curious to hear what you would offer.
Well, I would say two things. I was very impacted As a type A personality, I was very impacted by the people who showed up for me when my father passed away. And I was also very impacted by the people who didn't show up for me. And I didn't realize that I was going to care about the people who didn't show up for me, but I cared a lot, and it came to manifest itself. And the people who didn't show up for me are no longer in my life. Because I realized that what I had learned as a younger person, to be there in the best of times is the most important thing, but to be there in the worst of times is even more important. And I needed some people who didn't come through for me, and I could not get over that. I couldn't. I didn't think I would care because I thought I was strong enough. I thought I was strong enough to handle it all on my own, but I needed certain people who weren't there for me.
And I think that, and you have every right to feel that, but I think that also speaks to people's discomfort around death, and that it's not necessarily like a personal thing. It's just they can't handle it, and they're so uncomfortable. And yes, it shouldn't be about them, obviously, but sometimes when people are faced with really uncomfortable situations, it shows the amount of work they have or haven't done on themselves. And again, not from a judgmental perspective, it's just some people just aren't capable the way that you might be. And it's not necessarily like, it's not a right or wrong. It's just, it is what it is. And
it is what it is.
But you also have the right to say, okay, well, that's not good enough for me anymore. Right. And that's your right as well. And so I think it's all coming from, that space.
Yeah. And my type A personality, I told them exactly how it made. I mean, it was years later than I realized that for some reason I was pulling away from like one person in particular, but I was pulling away and I couldn't figure it out. And I pinpointed it at like at that moment that, and I said, I really feel like this is what it was for me. And I had a really good conversation. And it's like, because I'm like right in I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm thinking because that's just who I am. And they just did not respond in a way that was what I had thought. There was no apology. There was nothing. Not that I needed an apology. Like everybody has to deal with it differently, but I just needed some sort of response that they could be there for me in the future for things. And it didn't seem like that was going to happen. And so that was just, it was just like, as we get older, we people just aren't in our lives anymore. And I realized in that moment that there was, there was no space for that anymore. And so I would say that's a really long way of saying, and I hope you cut that down.
No, I'm keeping it all.
They're keeping it on. That's a really long way of saying that. Take a deep breath, do what's best for you in your time. If you're type A and you got to do a million things that make you feel better because that's your personality, then go do them all day long. Organize, be in charge of something, throw yourself into a job, do whatever it is that makes you feel good in the moment, and deal with it when you are ready, when you're good and ready, or don't deal with it. Like it's not something that we can know how we're going to deal with something at any given time. I don't know that I would deal with another death in the same way. I have no idea. I think everything is in its moment. I feel like I had grieved so much in advance of my father's passing that I was ready to do other things. And I don't think that I was grieving his passing as much as I was grieving him missing certain moments, which I think is very different.
Yeah.
I don't at all grieve the fact he had no life. He was bedridden. It was an awful existence. It was not something that I would wish on my worst enemy, but I grieve the things that he's missed. I grieve what he has not been able to be a part of. The birthdays that have gone by, the watching his grandchildren grow. Those are the things I grieve, not anything, not him living a second longer in the body that he had been given, because that's not a life. So yeah, I don't think I would do it any differently, but I honestly won't know until God.
Well, and it's, look, hopefully we don't have to experience this for another very, very long
years.
time. Yes. Yeah. But, different circumstances, you're a different version of yourself than you were 10 years ago, and you will be in another year. Like I believe we're always changing and evolving based on what we're given and how we react and respond to it and what we learn along the way. And who you are now is going to be different. And the next one, hopefully again, not for a very long time, you'll just see. And you can't judge yourself either way for how you react and respond, because it's where you're at in that moment.
I do want to say one thing. My sister-in-law, who was a social worker at Paperman's in Montreal, said to me before my father died while he was in palliative, she said, I'm going to suggest one thing. Take pictures. Take as many pictures as you can. You might not want to remember him like this, but take a family picture, take pictures of him with your kids. And so we did. The girls, we have him, watching a video, we have him in palliative with the last picture of the four of us for the last time. We have pictures of Samantha reading him a book. We have pictures that I cherish, even though they are in his darkest moments and his last moments. It was the greatest advice I had ever been given. They're pictures that I look at all the time. And I'm so grateful that I have those moments. And, and I would say that if you can muster up the courage, if that is the process that is happening in your family, there's a member that's in palliative, or that you have a moment before, try to do that. She was so smart in telling me to do that. I thought it was the weirdest thing in the world. And now I have these very odd, but very poignant and amazing photographs that I will cherish for a lifetime. And it continues to be not a terrible thing to see him in that state. And I want my children to know that the hospital and death and life and the cemetery and a funeral and all of those things show up. Just show up and be there. And that's the life lesson that I was given, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And that is how I want to live my life. And that's how I hope my children live theirs.
Well, I love it. And I love you. And I appreciate you sharing so honestly and openly about your experience. And I think it's going to help a lot of people, especially us type A kind of people. And once again, I just, I've told you this 1,000 times, but, you were an instrumental part in helping me move forward and heal. And you're always there, even when I ask you not to be, in the most loving way. But, I do love and appreciate you. Yeah, I do love and appreciate you and your food, and you never wanting me to help. That is like one of the most cherished things. So yeah.
I love you like crazy. I'm always going to be there when you don't want me there.
And even when I do. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Just drop it off and ring the doorbell.
That's right.
I'm kidding. All right. Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
Bye for now. 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, stay on. Okay, bye. All right, my friends. Thank you so much for listening to this So That Just Happened podcast. I really hope you found value in this episode, and that you're walking away with at least one golden nugget that you can implement or feel inspired by. I would be so grateful if you would share it with one friend or family member who is committed to moving forward and transforming their life. Make sure you subscribe so you can catch every new episode, and please leave me a review. It would mean so much to me. Also, follow me on Facebook and Instagram at @CoachCarly. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.